Hello everyone, and welcome to this video called Business Applications from Scratch in WEBCON BPS 2019. In a way, this video is an update on business applications from scratch in 45 minutes, which was the kind of done on the previous version of WEBCON BPS. However, currently to show off the new features in WEBCON BPS 2019, especially the presentation end, the WEBCON BPS portal, I'll be doing an updated version of the video. So by business application in general, when I talk about business application, I talk about the three cornerstones. So first of all, we definitely want the workflow, the business logic, essentially the task assignment, the logic which defines what tasks are assigned to whom, so that users don't have to worry about this. Essentially, a user wants to requisition an item, or in our case, they want to register a gift, and they don't have to worry about who to add to the email, who to tell, who to inform about what. They just fill out the form, click on the button, and the workflow does everything else. The workflow will, if there is an automated conditions assigned, then the workflow will automatically decide who to assign the task to. We will also need some sort of way for the user to interface with the workflow. In this case, we'll be using the form. The form will be built out of some sort of input fields, what we call form fields. Of course, this can be a title, so like a text field, a picker from the Active Directory for selecting, for example, a user, or a simple entry field for a floating point number, so for example, to enter some sort of value. In WEBCON BPS, apart from defining the input field, we can also define the layout of the form directly inside WEBCON BPS Designer Studio. And so this was already here in previous versions to make workflows and forms directly in WEBCON BPS Designer Studio. However, up until this point, the presentation layer, so in our case it is SharePoint, still the default presentation layer for us, this had to be done, of course, configured on SharePoint in the form of web parts. However, currently in WEBCON BPS 2019, there is what we call WEBCON BPS portal, or just portal, which allows us to define a presentation layer. It also uses an updated form, which we call the modern form, but it allows us to define, it is like a landing page, a site for our entire organization. It allows us to configure reports, which are like the reporting web parts from previous versions, so show workflow elements and show workflow charts. And it also allows us to create user dashboards, where we can add pictures, we can add links, and we can add things that we think our users, a specific user or maybe a group of users, will need in their day-to-day work. And so, and the important thing is that in this current version, all three of these, it is possible to define directly in Designer Studio. The presentation layer can also be defined directly on the site, which I will show you directly in your browser. But the configuration of web parts, and especially of these new presentation layer elements, are stored as part of the process, or in our case, as part of the application definition. So this is very handy, because in one place, in one program, in WEBCON BPS Designer Studio, you can configure these three cornerstones of the business application. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the scenario which we'll be carrying out. So this is a classic, the one that we've already been using, gift registration. It allows us to, it is essentially a very basic workflow, which also has a little bit of room for improvement, and there is a lot of potential, as you can add a lot of cool things and show off some cool features. But it is also one of the simplest workflows you can possibly imagine. So the idea is as follows: the user, if you are running a charity, a library, or something like that, or it could be even for personal gifts. So the user receives the gifts. User received the gift from a different corporation, or they were in some sort of conference and they have received something. And well, this usually has to go through some sort of compliance, unless it is a very small gift. But bigger gifts, it has to go through some sort of approval process. So in our case, the user receives a gift and they want to check whether it is okay that they received this gift. So they input some data about this gift, like the value, the description, etc., etc., and then they can hit register, and it will go to their manager, the person directly above them in the Active Directory in this case. And then the manager can then either approve or reject the gift. But If they approve, we will have this automated field. Automated step. We will add this a bit later. In the first iteration of this workflow, we won't have this, but this is an automated step. Essentially, it will check the value of the gift. If it is a very small gift, so if it is below, let's say, an arbitrary value of 500, it will be automatically approved and go directly to the gift approved step. But if it is a bigger gift, so let's imagine that 500 is a large number, and if this gift, the value exceeds 500 of whatever currency we're using, then it will go to an additional step called compliance approval. And here we can imagine that we have some guys responsible for the gift compliance policy, and then they will either also approve or reject this gift. And as mentioned, I will be using, for the entirety of this video, I'll be using WEBCON BPS. So the forms and workflows were always kind of part inside the Designer Studio. And as our default and recommended end user interface, the presentation layer, we always recommend and always use SharePoint. But in our case, just to show off the new capabilities of WEBCON BPS 2019, I will be showing it on the standalone WEBCON BPS portal, which of course, if you want, you can mix and match SharePoint and portal. You can have portal pieces displayed on SharePoint. If you would like it, you can use one process can use SharePoint, another process can use portal. It is completely up to you. Okay, so I am currently in WEBCON BPS Designer Studio. I've created an application. So if you have seen previous versions of WEBCON BPS, you may remember that the highest organization kind of structure unit is a process. But currently we have one step higher. We have what we call applications. Inside Designer Studio, and for the purpose of WEBCON BPS, an application for us is a group. It could be one or multiple, as many as you want, logically connected processes. So processes from previous versions are exactly the same. One process. So in this case, when I was creating the application, which I called Gifts and Hospitality, I also created a default process called Gift Approval, and a process can have any number of workflows. And also by default, you also create one form type, which I called Gift Form. These asterisk and negative IDs means that it is not saved. If I hit save process, then okay, so it wants me to first save the application, no problem. All right, yeah. So now that I've saved these have positive IDs. That's good, excellent. So a process can have any number of workflows. These workflows can be connected. They can be separate. So, for example, they can work completely individually, or they can have different relations. So, for example, one workflow can start another workflow. So when one workflow ends, it can start another workflow, or it can even start another process. So again, applications allow us to organize loosely or logically connected processes together and bundle them into what we call applications in WEBCON BPS. And what we'll get to in a little bit later, an application, so essentially all the processes of an application share what we call this presentation layer, but we'll get to that in a moment. First of all, let's work on our first cornerstone, our workflow. So we have this one default workflow, which we called approval workflow. And the idea is that by default, it will always have a start step and an end step. To it, we will add these things that we call intermediate steps. They are essentially, let's zoom out a little bit, they are in a way the most important steps in the workflow. An intermediate step for us is a step where there is some sort of task to be completed. So, for example, a user has to add an attachment, process an attachment, fill out some data. They also have to do this on the start step, but start steps can also be automated. In our case, we also have some data to fill out on our start step, which we'll call registration. Okay, And let's get rid of this step for now. So this path. And the idea is that start steps, they can be automated. So for example, they can be triggered by an incoming email, or by if an attachment arrives in a shared folder. But manually started workflow instances are also, well, they're probably the most commonly used, most common way of starting workflow instances. So essentially, as a kind of reminder, our scenario will be as follows. An end user will wander into this application. They want to register a gift. They start a new workflow instance, and then on the registration step, they will fill out some data, which will give them a form to interface with in just a moment. But first, we're doing this. We're configuring the workflow. So they will have to hit a button called register, and then when they click on this button, the workflow instance will go to the next step. In this case, it will be the manager approval step. And we can call this path button register gift, for example, not dift, gift, for example. It's okay, it's spaced out, okay. And so here is kind of in a way, one of the most important configurations inside WEBCON BPS Designer Studio, configuring the task assignment. Because if we were to kind of get rid of all the sparkles and of all the presentation stuff, if we were to boil down a workflow to its absolute key components, to its most essential elements, a workflow is essentially just logic for assigning tasks, so that users don't have to think about who they need to talk to, who they need to contact for different things. They just click buttons. So now we have to kind of define the logic of what happens when this end user clicks on this register gift button. So for this, we have to configure what we call a so-called task. So in the register gift path, we have the task creation, and we have some methods of assigning these tasks, predefined based on the organization structure or based on some conditions. So for example, you can assign it directly to your superior in the Active Directory, which would be the most useful one in this case. But since we are just creating this for testing purposes, I will just assign it to myself, so that I will always be the one with the tasks assigned. But of course, before throwing such a thing onto the production environment, you would probably want to test it with like the proper configuration. But for now, always 2 is fine. We'll just this task will always be assigned directly to me. Okay, and so now the manager, once he has this task, once he receives this task, his task will revolve around clicking a button. Well, one of 2 buttons. He can either approve the gift, or he can reject it. These things at this finish positive and this new step, negative end step, they're called end steps. And what is the difference between these 2? Functionally, there is no difference. They are just different colors, so that we can show them on the diagram, and so that we can differentiate between them. But essentially, they could, both of these paths could lead to the same step. Essentially, these are archive steps. The idea here is that when a workflow instance arrives inside an end step, nobody has to be assigned to it. Then this is the kind of the main differentiation between a workflow instance that is in an end step and a workflow instance that what we call active. So an active workflow instance is one that somebody has a task to complete on it, so that somebody is always responsible for this workflow instance. Once a workflow instance lands in one of these end steps, it is considered no longer active, and nobody has any tasks to complete on that workflow instance, and it is now considered inactive. So one of these end steps, we can let's say the positive one is gift approved, and this one here we can call it gift rejected. And of course, if the manager has 2 different buttons, one called new path and the other called new path, then they will not know which one is which. So let's call this one approve, and let's call this one reject. Okay, let's save. and let's run a test. So I'm going to start this workflow instance, because at this moment we don't have anything apart from the workflow definition. The only thing that we have at this moment is just the logic of how these tasks are sent. So I click a button here, it goes to, well, me, or it would go to somebody else if I define somebody else for it to go, and then the person in this step can either click approve or reject. So a very basic, probably the most basic imaginable workflow, and the only thing that we want to see is if it works correctly. So let's start a new workflow instance for testing purposes. Okay, so if you've used previous versions of WEBCON BPS, then you will notice that the form changed a bit. This is what we call the modern form. This is also available on SharePoint. You can easily use these new forms or the classic SharePoint forms, but it was slightly renovated, and this is the kind of what we call WEBCON BPS portal. So you may have noticed that the information panel moved from left to right to make space for this navigation panel over here. But essentially, to kind of focus on the main point here, is that this is the form, which currently has really nothing on it. The important parts here are the attachments panel over here, which is of course empty, and the comments box. These are some default sections which are available on all default forms. But we have not configured anything here, and this is just the default elements. So essentially it is barren. But what is interesting for us, two things really. So first of all, in the information panel, you will notice that we have the steps of our workflow. Here we can see some information. So for example, we know that this is the gift form. In the gift approval process, the workflow is called approval workflow, and the steps of this workflow are as follows. So we can see highlighted that we are in the registration step, and then we have the other steps listed in a wonky order, but we'll fix that in a moment. But essentially the other steps in this workflow are gift approved, manager approval, and gift rejected. So what will happen if we click on this path button here, predefined paths, register gift? What will happen? Okay, so I was redirected kind of back to my main page, because normally this is what's expected to happen. You complete a task and you are redirected back to your kind of starting page. But I want to go visit it, so here I have in the bottom here recent activities that I started this workflow instance, blah, 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 in the gift approval process, path transition register gift, two-step manager approval. Okay, just basically it's kind of telling me what I just completed, and just so I can quickly go back to continuing my work. So I will click on this to get redirected back to this form. And now, so this is the workflow instance that was started. It is the same one as previously, but it is currently in the manager approval step. I can see that it completed the registration step. It has this tick mark next to the registration step, and it is in the manager approval step. And so here, if you remember, I had two path buttons in Designer Studio, approve and reject. And this is shown here. I am in the manager approval step. It is assigned to me as I defined in the path assignment. And I have these two paths, these two path buttons available. So I can either reject it or approve it. So let's see what happens if I reject it. Okay, again, I get thrown back to my main page, which is of course the intended way for this to work. But as you can see, it lists the two most recent actions that I created this workflow instance with this with this instance number, which is of course definable. You can define how this instance number is generated. And here is that I moved it to the reject step from the manager approval step. So let's go check up on it. And it is true that I have currently dumped this workflow instance in the gift rejected step. I did not define any paths for this. It would be possible, of course, to have paths maybe leading out of an end step, but in general, workflow instances and end steps are considered no longer active, and nobody has any tasks to complete there. So in a way, this workflow is currently completed. So even though I didn't fill out anything, but for the purpose of this workflow instance was registered, and then it was rejected by the manager. Okay, so that was kind of the first Cornerstone. Well, we will of course build up on the workflow, and we'll add the decision step, which will automatically decide where the workflow should go. But for now, we have kind of already built this very basic workflow, and now we can kind of now that we have a very basic workflow, we can start work on our second cornerstone, on our form. So to build a form, I will first need to define some form fields. Form fields are defined per process. So if you have one process that has multiple workflows, those workflows, it is possible for them to share the same pool of form fields. So in our case, we'll add some very basic input fields, some text fields, some floating point value fields, also one field for adding some recipient, so a picker from the Active Directory, and also a date field with a date calendar picker. Okay, so I'm going to quickly add them. It is very simple. All I do is click new form field. I'm going to add 5 straight away because I know I'm going to need 5. And I'm going to define them in just a moment. All right, so for the first one, let's have a field for entering the title. So the default type of form field is called single line of text, and this will serve us perfectly. We have about 20 or 30 to 20 something different types of form fields. The most basic one is of course the single line of text, which, as the name implies, it allows us to enter one line of text. Then let's have a description for this gift. Let's call it gift description. So and here let's give the end user some extra space to enter more data. So let's do it multiple lines of text. And also at this point, it is worth noting that form fields, they also have their own advanced configuration. Every single form field has their own. So for example, the title field, which is a single line of text, has a very simple configuration, nothing too special here. I just want the standard configuration, but a multiple lines of text field will already have slightly more stuff. Most importantly, it can use the text enhancers, so like emboldening, underlining, and italics, and also changing the colors of the text. If I select the mode into the rich editor, then I will be able to use these configuration options inside the multiple lines of text field. But for now, I'm just going to go with the standard mode. Next, let's add a field for entering the value of the gift. So unfortunately, the end user will have to ballpark estimate the value of this field, and let's do a floating point number. And here in the advanced configuration, we actually can do something. So we want this to be a value of some sort of currency. So number of 2 decimal places, number of decimal places 2. This is fine for us. Since the currency, for example, let's do dollars. So we'll have 2 decimal places. Show as amount, display format. We can choose whichever one you prefer. And the currency code, I will be using the $sign. So that looks okay. All right. So this will be a field for entering the value of the gift. Then let's add a gift for selecting the recipient. And this field type will be our first picker field. Picker fields are they're not like normal entry fields, as in the value can be predefined. So for example, you can load the value from one of the various data sources that you can use. So for example, from a SQL database or from an Oracle database, or you can predefine the fields yourself. You can also use SharePoint lists. And in the case of the person or group field, it will use by default the BPS users list, which is synchronized from the Active Directory. So we'll take that, personal group. Let's see the configuration. So these are all the fields, the attributes in the Active Directory, so we can leave that for now. And the last field, let's do a date received field, and this will be a picker for selecting the date. Date and time. There we go. And the default configuration, yeah, you can also enhance it by having it possible to select the time, but we can skip that for now. Okay, date received. Oh, and I forgot to, which one is this? Did I not call this? Oh, I think Okay, thank you for that information, Adobe. Wait, this is the gift description. Did I miss something? Oh, I think I may have accidentally changed one of the fields. Okay, never mind. So we have the title, we have some gift description, date received, gift value, and recipient. Okay, let's save this. So I have these 5 form fields defined. By default, they're added to our one form type, which we have currently. This one form type, which is by default, is associated with this approval workflow process. Sorry, approval workflow. These are all connected, so we don't have to do anything else here. What we have to do, though, is define the layout and the behavior of these form fields for this workflow. So this approval workflow has what we call the main form, and this is our form designer within WEBCON BPS Designer Studio. So the important thing here is that we have these sections, the top sections, the left and right sections, and the bottom section, which allow us to rearrange these form fields however we want. And this works exactly the same for SharePoint forms and for modern forms. The idea is that we sacrifice maybe some customization, so we cannot arrange these form fields pixel by pixel, but we gain a lot of configuration speed, with this we can make our forms look very similar, because the idea is that this main form will be used throughout the entire workflow. So the idea is to have one uniform form for the entire workflow. Of course, you can have on different steps, you can have different forms, but the recommended kind of way to create forms is always to have them look at least similar, and also not only have the same form for the workflow, but also have similar forms across your entire system. So even if different applications have different applications have the same form, then it will help user adoption immensely. Because even if a user is, for example, using an application or a process for the first time, or if they are for example, if they are asked to appear as a guest inside a process, or if they are maybe introduced to a new process which they'll be using from now on, if their forms look very similar to what they're used to, then they will quickly adopt the new process, the new workflow, and begin using it very efficiently. So, and this is also why we have these common elements like the task details, which can be used to inform the user of what they need to do on their specific task, on the specific step. The attachment section and the comment section are always very familiar, so that thanks to this, because the forms look very similar, the users will be able to navigate them more easily. Okay, so here I can, in this section, I can rearrange, I can drag these around, these form fields, as much as I want. I will also get rid of this business entity and instance ID, because I don't want them for now. I just want, in this left section, I just want my 5 form fields. I'm going to put maybe the recipient at the top, then date received, title, gift description, and gift value. Yeah, so this order, I like this order. I'll keep it for now. So this is the order in which the form fields will appear on the form. I will show it in just a moment. We have to do one more thing before we can proceed, before we can show this, what this form will look like, and that is the field matrix. So the field matrix may look scary at first, but it is actually a very useful and intuitive system of defining form field behavior. Oh, by the way, before I do the field matrix, I just want to do one more thing. So I mentioned I would fix the order of the steps because they looked a little wonky. So what I will do is in the workflow configuration, in the general tab, I can move this one space down. So this doesn't change the function of the workflow at all. It is exactly the same, but now in the information panel, they will appear in this order. They will appear registration, manager approval, gift approved, and gift rejected. So it is a slightly more logical order. So I'm gonna save this. And sorry, and now let's go back to the main form configuration, the field matrix. Okay, so a little explanation. Across the top, you have your steps. So you have your registration, manager approval, gift approved, and gift rejected. And down the left-hand side, you have all your form fields. We only have 5, so that's not much of a problem. And then they have these behavior checkboxes. So the first one, the blue one, is self-explanatory. If we have this checked, this form field will be visible and editable by the end user on this registration step. Fantastic. That's exactly what we want. The other option here is to make it read-only. Read-only has kind of 2 states. So this means that this field is visible to the end user but cannot be edited. The intermediate state means that it can be edited by JavaScript, and basically a lot of our calculations, the stuff that goes on under the form, under the hood stuff, is carried out via JavaScript. So this way the user will not be able to interact with this field, but JavaScript will be able to change stuff. So we can make this, we can select this if we have, for example, an automatically calculated value that it is calculated by, let's say, multiplying or adding other form fields. We do not want the end user to interfere with them. We just select this, and then the addition will be carried out normally. The last field is required basically if this field is selected, a red asterisk next to it will appear, and the end user will be forced to fill in a value. Otherwise, they will not be allowed to proceed to the next step. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these fields on this step all visible, and on the other steps I'm going to make them read-only. This can be done very quickly, for example by right-clicking and then having them set all to read-only. And on the other steps, I can do that again, or I can copy from one of the existing steps. So I can, for example, copy from this gift approved step, and this is a very fast and quick way of automatically filling out these configurations. All right, but anyway, let's save this. And now we can once again start a new workflow instance. I could have done it from here, but let's just open it in a new tab, no problem. Okay. So straight away we can see that stuff was added here compared to this form. Previously there was nothing. There was just the business entity name. But now I have my 5 form fields that I defined. So first of all, we have the recipient field. So let's try and select a value. If I type in anything and hit search, I'll be able to select stuff. So for example, I can select myself from this picker. Date received, let's select something, whatever, something here. Title, let's enter title. First gift test, gift description, this is test. And gift value, let's imagine that the gift value is $50. All right. And this is, well, as you can see, we have some basic input fields, and if I hit register gift, I'll be kicked back to the starting page, but I created a new workflow instance. As you can see here, it has a very similar instance number. So this one was 00001, this one is 00002. So let's go check it out. And this is now in the manager approval step. So as you can see, these fields are read-only, as in I cannot edit them. Of course, I could edit them in administration mode, but that would be cheating. So I'm not going to edit them. I am the manager. I only see these fields as read-only. I am not able to edit any of this stuff. I am only allowed to either approve or reject it. So because unlike in this previous one, which I rejected, I have nothing in here. Here I actually have some data, so I can approve it. I am the manager, and I decide that this is an OK request, and then it was sent to the gift. And it was sent to the approved step. There we go. All right. So kind of the next part, because we already have a very basic workflow and a very basic form. So now we can kind of begin to build on these ideas. So for example, as you saw, let's go back to the site. And let's start a new one. So I have these fields, but for example, I could have this recipient field and a date received field automatically fill to my current user. So I am currently logged in as this person. So I will it will automatically fill in this person, and the date can be auto-filled to the current date. So let's do that. We will do this by simply entering the default value. So for recipient, we will have a variable called current user. There we go. And for the date received, we'll have it as now. Again, similar to the SQL function to now and today. Now works for time as well. Today will only set the today date, but it will set the time to midnight, if I recall correctly. Okay, and one more thing that I'll also do, since I'm already here, I will add 2 groups. So this is something I will explain in just a moment once I do it. It is nice to group fields by fields that you have to edit and fields that you do not have to edit. So for example, I will have this, let's call it basic information group, and let's add, and to this group I will add stuff which I do not need to edit. So let's say the date received and the recipient. And the other group I will call gift information. And to this group I will add all the other stuff. So the title, I can drag and drop like this to add to the group, or I can select the form field and then select the group as gift information. And the groups, they behave very similarly to normal form fields. So again, I have to make these visible on the field matrix. So first of all, I'm going to check out the main form. Yeah, this is okay. Recipient date received, I can change the places for these. Okay, so the recipient is the top, title, gift value. Let's move the gift description up 1 piece. Okay, and in the field matrix, I am going to make these groups visible. I could make these recipient and date received read-only, but let's imagine that you can register a gift in somebody else's name and that you can also change the date when you receive it, because you probably will not create you don't have to create the workflow instance on the same date that you received the gift. So these fields are still editable. And let's also try to make the title a required field. And also, okay, let's also make these visible on all the other steps. Okay, let's save. And let's see what we have now. So now this is a great time to demonstrate instant change. So essentially what I did is I saved this inside Designer Studio. Now I'm going back to the browser, and all I have to do is hit refresh. And automatically the definition of my form was updated. All I had to do is hit save in Designer Studio and hit refresh in the browser, and that's it. No deployment, just what we call instant change technology. So as you can see here, I have this nice group called basic information where I have some data that's automatically filled out. I can change this because I decided to make this data editable. So if I want to register a gift in somebody else's name, no problem. And of course I can change the date received as well. Okay. Gift information, the title is required. As I mentioned, it has a red asterisk. So what will happen if I try to register this gift? I will get an information, sorry, you have to provide a value for the title field. Okay, so let's provide test gift 2, gift description, this is also a test, and gift value, let's make it $150. And let's go back to the main page. And it shows me here that I created another one. I thought that was I thought it redirected me to the rejected page, but never mind. So here we have again this new workflow instance, the third one that we created with the number 0003, and this is the one that we just created. So again, as the manager, I can imagine I'm the dude here, and I can either approve or reject it. Okay, and this time I was correctly kicked back to the main page. Okay, before we add the rest of the workflow, the conditional step, I want to add one more workflow instance, and for the purpose of the test, which I will kind of show you the other part of instant change. So yes, we saw how instant change, I refresh and it updates the form, but also workflow instances that are currently in progress, so that are currently already started in the workflow, will use the updated workflow definition if the workflow definition changes. So to show that, I'm going, because all my other workflow instances are in end steps, so I'm going to start a new one now. Let's call this instant change test, gift number 3, and let's give it intentionally a value of 600, and let's register this gift. Oops, where did it kick me? All right, never mind. Yep, okay, back to the landing page of this application. This instance is currently in the manager approval step. All right, so we will come back to this a little bit later. We just have to remember that this workflow instance is inside the manager approval step, and it is still using the old workflow definition. So now let's change the workflow definition by inserting. There we go. Couldn't hit it with my mouse. By inserting a new step. This step is called flow control, and it is an automatic step. Basically, a workflow instance will arrive into it, and based on some predefined conditional function or whatever, or business rule in our case, it will decide where to redirect the workflow instance. So let's try and zoom out and squeeze it in. So the manager will still be able to do what he was able to do up till now, to approve or reject. But when the manager hits approve, instead of going to the gift approved step, it will first go to this step, which is, let's call it value check. Okay, and the idea here is as follows. This workflow instance, if it is a very small gift, it will go directly to the gift approved step. So let's call this path less than 500. But if it is a very big, if it is a larger gift, it will go to an additional choice called compliance approval. And we can imagine that in this step there is a group of people, compliance approval, that there is a group of people that are responsible for vetting gifts and seeing whether they should approve them or not. So if this is a bigger gift, it will first go into this step, and the guys in compliance approval, they have the same okay, maybe I dragged it a little bit too far. They have the same kind of paths available that the manager, so they can either reject it, reject, or they can then approve it, and this will be like the kind of final approval. If the compliance approval and the manager accept, approve a workflow instance, then it goes to the gift approved end step. Let's call it approve. And of course, since we have a new intermediate step, we have to define some form of task assignment. So essentially, because these path, this lesser, okay, let's also rename this path first and call this new path greater than 500. So now I have one for lesser and one for greater than 500. You can name these whatever you want. The actual condition is defined in a different way, so just calling these paths this name will not do anything. They are just, I'm just calling them so I can find them easier. Okay, but the idea is that this path leads to an end step, this approve path leads to an end step, and this reject path leads to an end step. So for those paths, we don't have to configure anything. However, this path here, so if the workflow instance goes to the value check, and if it is greater than 500, and it goes to compliance approval, it has to be assigned to someone, because this is an intermediate step, and somebody on this step will have to receive this workflow instance, and somebody has to be responsible for the workflow instance. So let's configure it. And again, we're going to cheat a bit. So we could imagine that we have a group called some organization unit or a SharePoint group called compliance approval. And if I hit enter and we actually had one of those, then it would be assigned to all those people inside that group. But since I am a cheater, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to assign this to myself. So a bit cheeky, but for the purpose of this test, it should be fine. Okay, So now we have defined this workflow, but now we have to define the condition, which will actually decide where to send this workflow instance once it arrives from the manager approval step into this value check step. So how do we do this? Very simply, the flow control type step will always have this additional tab called flow control active, and in this area we can define a business rule which will steer this the workflow instance that arrives in this step. So let's configure such a business rule. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add, first of all, an if-then function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a comparison. If lesser than, so if what did I call my field? Gift value, was it? Yes, it is. So I can use the mouse or I can use the arrow keys to navigate and find what I'm looking for. I am looking for this field, the gift value field. So if the value entered into this gift value field, the number, is lesser than, and let's enter rigidly 500, then we want to take the path value check lesser than 500. So this is our let's move. I can't move this out of the way, but this is the fast path, the quick path. It goes direct to the gift approved step. Otherwise, it will take the other path, which is the value check greater than 500. So the idea is that if the gift value lesser than 500, you could use a different variable for this. Of course, you could store it in a different place. You don't have to enter it rigidly. I just entered it for simplicity's sake. If it is lesser than 500, then it will take this lesser than 500 path directly to the gift approved step. Otherwise, it will take this this value check. From the value check, it will take the greater than 500 path, which goes to our additional new compliance approval intermediate step. All right. And so now the kind of to see if this works. Essentially what happened is I updated the workflow definition. So this workflow is quite a bit different. It has 2 additional steps from when I last left off. However, the cool thing is, if I one more thing I can change, I can move this compliance approval up a few points and save this as well. So even though, now back in the browser, even though this workflow instance is already underway, it is in the manager approval step, it will use the new workflow definition if I hit one of the path buttons. Essentially, if I saved correctly, you can see that this new compliance approval step appeared on the steps path. I didn't have to refresh. I could just hit one of the buttons and it would go to that step. But essentially, this workflow instance, even though it is already underway, even though it is mid workflow, it will use the updated workflow definition that I just updated and edited it. It will not use the old workflow definition. It will use the new one. So I can hit approve and see what happens. Notice that the gift value is greater than 500. It is 600. So if I configured everything correctly, it should land in the compliance approval step. All right, so I see here path transition approve from manager approval to step compliance approval. Great. And it is in this gift approval process, which we already know. All right, so if I go navigate towards it, I will see that, well, it is in the compliance approval step, but of course, because I forgot to define the field matrix and the form layout for this step, it is very empty. So let's just quickly change that to show you how easy it is. Go to the main form, and as you can see here, the compliance approval step appeared in our field matrix. So what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to copy the settings from the manager approval, because the guys in compliance approval, essentially their job is pretty similar to the manager. They only have to hit approve or reject. So let's give them the same view that the manager has. I'm going to hit save, go back to the site, hit refresh, and we are still in the compliance approval step, but essentially I see all this new information. Well, I just see the updated form. All I had to do was just make these form fields visible for the guys in compliance approval, hit save process, go back to my browser and hit refresh, and voila, I have the exact same view that the manager had. Okay, so now we can actually get to the new stuff in WEBCON BPS 2019, everything that we did up until this point, the forms and the workflows. It was already available in previous versions, albeit now it has a new lick of paint. But those two cornerstones that we've already done, those were already doable in previous versions directly inside Designer Studio. So now we're going to get to the new part, to WEBCON BPS portal. So here is the landing page for portal. I accidentally arrived here a little earlier in the video, so you've probably seen it already, but this is the landing page. So at the very top I have a task counter, which this little element is also embeddable in SharePoint, so it's not only available in portal. Frequently used applications suggest some stuff for me, and here is the giant list of applications that I have defined already in Designer Studio. And at the very bottom I can also find my gifts and hospitality application I've created. If I go to it, so this is the view that you've already seen, just has the recent activities and a very generic start button. I should probably also add a description for it. So this hasn't been configured much yet. Generally, what we'll do now is we'll configure the new presentation elements. So there are three types. So there is the start buttons, reports, and dashboards. So start buttons are obviously buttons for starting the workflow. Let's go check one out. Let me find one that's already configured. Back to the main page. This will be fine. So here you can see an array of already configured start buttons. You can adjust the color, you can change the name and the description, and of course you can change the functionality of each one so that they start. They can start different processes, obviously, because this is an application. This is an application view. So an application, since it is a group of logically connected processes, each of these start buttons can be associated with a different process, but they can be also associated with the same process. So for example, I think that these two are probably with the same process because they are the same color. I don't know, it just looks logically that way. But they can be two different workflows within a process, or they can be, of course, the same workflow but two different form types, which is what we're going to do in just a moment. But for now, I just wanted to show you what these look like. This is how they are arranged. The next part that we have are reports. So reports are a big topic because essentially in our case, okay, I'll do this one because I know this one has a lot of data inside it. So reports are the new version of show workflow element and show workflow chart web parts. Essentially a report can be both of them at the same time. It is a way to display workflow instances that we have inside our system. So let me show you one that is already configured. So this is the kind of default main view of a report that has been already configured. All of these rows are some workflow instances, and they have a certain number of columns here. And the idea is that since when we were configuring show workflow elements web parts, we realized that a lot of the time we need very similar show workflow elements web parts. Maybe the data changes between them just a little bit, or the displayed data changes just a little bit. So we ended up copying and pasting a lot of show workflow elements and show workflow charts web part configuration and just modifying it slightly. So to kind of replace that, or kind of offer really an alternative, we have the reports, and each report can have any number of views. So essentially we can imagine them as a sort of sub-reports. So for example, here I have these defined. So this is the kind of default view, the kind of main view, sort of, and then we can have any number of smaller views. So for example, here we have all the purchase requests in this purchase request application, and then I have a sub view, or just a view, a sub report, where I participated. So probably ones that I had completed a task inside. And it is true that in this case I was the initiator for all of these. So the idea here is that these views can be configured by the administrator. It can be configured from here, from portal. The admin can configure it here by going into edit mode. and this is the configuration. We will get into this in detail a bit later, but also this configuration is available inside Designer Studio. So I'm going to try find this purchase request application, and I'm going to show you. Okay. All right, here we go, presentation elements. So it has this all purchase requests report, and as you can see, the configuration inside Designer Studio looks identical to the one if we go into the edit mode on inside the browser. And we have the views tab where we can configure these views. So all purchase requests is the kind of default view, has a star next to it, and then we have two other supplementary table reports. And now the cool part. So as you can see here, this one has a different icon. It's called purchases over time. So essentially within the views within the report can be like the standard table, the reports, so like show workflow elements web part, but also the reports have a built-in functionality to have views that look like show workflow charts, and we call these chart reports. So the idea is that you have the main report, and then you can have views which can be both tables, both charts, and of course you can have charts as the main default view of the report if you want. That's not a problem as well. So let's go check one out. This is purchases over time. So here is the view, the chart view that we have defined. In this case, let me see, it is the value of purchase requests on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we have when it was registered. So let's, for example, check out here. We can see that on the 1st of January we have the total value of just above 500,000 of purchase requests. So now the cool part. If you remember show workflow charts, it was possible to create different aggregation levels. So you could select one of these values, one of these bars, or one of these sections of the pie chart, and then it would take you to the lower aggregation level. And this is of course configurable, so let's go check it out. Well, let me see here. Purchase requests over time. We have a chart level 1, which is the bar chart, which on the x-axis we have months, on the y-axis we have values, and then we can have a second level. So here we already can see that it will be a donut chart. So let's go check it out inside the browser. So for example, I want to click on this 1st of January bar. So I'm going to preview all the stuff that was created on the 1st of January. Well, the purchase requests that were started on the 1st of January. Let's go click on it, and this will take me to the second level, the kind of lower aggregation level. So this is already filtered. This shows me purchase requests that were created on the 1st of January, and it is divided. The sections of the pie chart represent the different categories. So the purchase request can have hardware, services, and software. And then if I scroll over it, it will tell me exactly what value, how much each category contributes to the total purchase request value for the 1st of January. And then at the very bottom, as a kind of special, this is as a kind of if you remember in show workflow charts, you have the you can have the very bottommost aggregation level. It can be a detailed data level, which is essentially just a view, a table view. So let's see. Let's click here on software, and this will take me to the very bottom. We already have a filtered view. These are workflow instances that were started first of all on the first. So January. Yeah. So it was just January. So anyway, just those that were started in January. And those that were, what was this one here? That was software. Yes. Yeah. So these are software categories that were started in January. And if I, for example, if I can go back, let's see, for example, here services. So here are services that were service requests that were started in January as well. So this is what the report configuration or the kind of the end result looks like, and we will configure our very own small reports for our gift approval application. But there is one more presentation element that I want to show you. It's called the dashboards. So this allows you to create, well, landing pages, or maybe not necessarily landing pages, but just kind of places where that can be created for specific employees, and which will help them with their work. So for example, here we have purchase request dashboard. So a dashboard is fully customizable. Let me show you. You essentially can create these sections. So for example, here, this first rectangle at the top here is divided into 2 columns. This one here is also divided into 2 columns, but this one is takes up 2/3 of the screen, and this one takes up 1/3. And if I go quickly here, if I want to add another one, you can see you can add one kind of giant section, divided into 2, divided into 3, or divided into 2, but you have this lopsided where one column takes up 2/3 of the space. And then inside these sections, once you have carved up your dashboard into these pieces, you can add stuff. So for example, you can add start buttons. You can place them into here. You can place a start, and you can place the task counter, as you can see here. And also a cool thing is a report tile. In this case, if I recall correctly, this one, it shows all purchase requests and the sum of the value field. So essentially it shows, if I am interpreting this correctly, it shows the total sum value of all purchase requests. And we can go quickly verify this. If I go to the all purchase requests report, hopefully there will be a summation at the very bottom. And yes, it shows 699,000, which aligns with this tile. So that's cool. You can also embed reports, but of course the complete report is also possible, but more importantly, you can embed certain views. So if you have, for example, a report with 5 views, and you want to have these views within view, so you want to see them all at the same time, you can add them one beneath the other. So if you, for example, want to compare some data, you can quickly arrange these. You can quickly add reports and then select a specific view. As you can see here on the left hand side, you can also have chart type views. That's not a problem as well. And did I mention that you can embed YouTube videos and images? And of course, there is a small text box as well. So if you need to type some stuff, like instructions, for example, for somebody, you can type that in as well. Okay, so that was a very chaotic and quick introduction to presentation elements in BPS, WEBCON BPS portal. So now let's actually configure some stuff for our gifts and hospitality application, because there we don't have any start buttons, or we don't have any reports or dashboards. One more thing that I would like to mention before I proceed is that these presentation elements, and actually the entirety of WEBCON BPS portal, can be embedded into SharePoint by using web parts. In version 2019, we have new web parts, WEBCON BPS web parts that we call modern web parts, and they essentially allow you to embed start buttons, reports, dashboards, and elements like the task counter from portal, and as I mentioned, the entirety of portal as well. If you need to, because like for example the start buttons, you could imagine that they are pretty redundant, as we already have a start workflow web part on SharePoint, but still you can embed whatever you need from your portal directly in SharePoint if you want to. So okay, so let's configure a start button. So since I'm the administrator, I will always see these kind of gray button, which allows me to start any element. It is essentially, it looks like an unconfigured button. It allows me to start this application. In this case, I only have one process, so I don't have much to select here, which is a cool way, because using one button you can start any process inside your application. But of course, for end users, we do not want that. We want end users to have a very simple experience. So let's try configuring a start button. Okay, so here on the right hand side, we will have a small preview of what we are doing. So let's call this register gift. Let's maybe change the color to something like yellow. Description, submit a gift for approval, RG for the abbreviation. Business entity, I don't remember which one I'm supposed to be using, so I'll just take this one and hope it works. Well, I can have some default values entered into when I start the workflow, for instance, but I do not want that because I already configured some of those. And let's see if it will work. Okay, so I have a start button, and let's see what will happen if I click on it. Okay, so now I have a method for end users to quickly start workflow instances, because up until this point, to kind of test the workflow, I was starting them from Designer Studio, and of course that's not a solution for end users. So we kind of wanted to have a button like this. So now an end user will land on the portal page. They know they have to register a gift, so they go to the gifts and hospitality application, and then if they don't have access to administration mode, they won't see these buttons. They will only see this one button here, register gift, and then they will be taken to this form. Some data will be automatically filled in for them, and they only have to fill in data into these 3 fields and then hit register, and then they're done, and then they get thrown back to the main portal page or to the application page, and then they can continue with their work. So for the end user, this is perfect. Let's add one more button to kind of show that you can start the same workflow. In this case, oh, by the way, let's go back to our, where was it? Gifts and hospitality. Let's load it. So until I save, let's go. Okay, so as you can see, the start button isn't here, because I need to still disable edit mode over here in this menu from the top here. If I hit disable edit mode, this should save any changes that I made to the application in Portal, and hopefully if I hit refresh, a new start button will appear, and that is our register gift button in here. Okay, so we have one. I want to add one more. So we have only one workflow, so let's create another form type so that we can actually have 2 buttons which do 2 distinct things. So I'm going to create another form type. Let's imagine that we have donation form. Let's call the acronym DF, for example. And to make the form slightly different, maybe let's get rid of the gift description, since we only want the title and the gift value. Okay. Save it. Let's associate this form with the workflow so that we are able to start it from here as well. Save process. And inside here, let's go back to edit mode. Let's add another start button. And now, since I have 2 different form types, I can now select it from this drop down. So let's go donation form. Maybe let's change the color to green, because that's associated with money. Maybe lighter green or darker. I don't know. Okay, let's keep this one. So submit donation. Submit a donation for approval. SD. Business entity, this one worked last time, so we'll keep that one, and let's save it. Okay, let's exit edit mode. And so now we have 2 buttons which start the same process, start the same workflow, but for 2 different form types. So if I click on this one, I have this normal form that we already seen, And if I click on this one, I should be missing the one form field, which is not part of this form type. And that's cool. So now we have something to work with. We have 2 buttons. And now let's go and check out reports. Okay, so now to add a report, of course, we can add it inside Designer Studio in here, but to show kind of how it's done on Portal, I will add it directly from here, add new element, and I can select the default type of view, so either table or chart. Let's go with table for now. Okay, so let's call this all gifts and donations. So for the source, of course, the content database to which WEBCON BPS is connected, the application gifts and hospitality, great. The process, let's see. So yeah, so there is only one inside, so that's okay. Gift approval, yes. All form types, yep. I can narrow it down to one of the two form types I have created, either just to donations or just to gifts. But for now, let's keep it to all of them. And let's see, all workflow and steps, yes, because I only have one workflow, and we can keep it in all the steps, just kind of general overview for all of them. Assign filter all of them as well. So these are things that you may remember from the show workflow elements web part configuration. You can add some filters here based, for example, on the participation of the user inside various tasks. So you could, for example, have a separate view of a report where the user can see workflow instances that he started. For example, you can also filter based on a form field. So for example, I could have it so that to only show instances where the, for example, value field is lesser than 500 or greater than 500. So only see big workflow instances, big value workflow instances or low value workflow instances, depending on what you want. And there's also URL filters and SQL filters as well. So now let's go to the column configuration. So this is we are currently configuring the default view. So these are all the columns by default that are added. Let's see if we can go into here. We can find our form fields. So here they are by group. So this is the basic information, so the recipient and date received, and we can drag and drop them into this area to configure the view. Oops, missed it. Okay, and I can add them wherever I want. So I'll rearrange them in just a moment. Let's add all these. Okay, and by default sorting, we can, for example, group them by, for example, well, all of them will be the same, but let's, for example, by a recipient. Let's see. So this is the basic default view. Okay, let's check what it looks like. So it was added here. Let's disable. Let's go back from close, and here we have the kind of for now the ad hoc report that we just configured, the default view of the report. So as you can see, the columns are in a weird order, but that's not a problem. We can fix that. We added all our form fields onto here, so we can see kind of a report of all workflow instances that were created inside this application. And the cool thing is that I have this link inside the instance number column, so I can travel directly to this workflow instance. So what's important to note here is that, for example, since these three are in the end step, so gift rejected, gift approved, and gift approved, they do not have anyone assigned to them because they are in end steps. And we can see here that this 0004 is inside the compliance approval step, so the workflow instance is assigned to me. So I can travel to it directly, and since I have a task to complete here, I can either approve or reject. Okay, so let's try and add another view to it. So here we only have one. Oh, and the cool thing is that if a user decides that the views that they have are unsatisfactory, so that they can maybe add additional data to it, or remove stuff, or maybe they can rearrange the columns so they can better cross-examine the values, it is possible to simply drag and drop these columns around, and then you can see the asterisk appear, and then we can, if we are just a regular end user, we can save this view as a private view, and it will only be available to us. So this is a cool way for end users to customize their own views, and so that they can have them for their own personal reasons. I mean, like for example, if a user has a very big monitor, then they can add additional data. As long as the administrator makes these columns available, maybe not add them to the default view, but just kind of adds them, and they are available to the end user. The end user can add these columns into their view, and well, customize it, rearrange it to their liking, apply their own filters, and apply their own sorting, whatever they need. All right, so now let's add two additional views, one standard table view and one chart view. So let's go in here. Okay, so here is my all gifts and donations report, and let's add another view in here in the view tab. For now, let's do a normal table, and let's do it all approved gifts and donations, for example. Okay, so since we want these to only be the approved ones, so the ones in the end step, of course, if I made a separate report, because this one is called all gifts and donations, I could make a completely separate report, and here in the column, in the source filter, I could add here in the source, I could make it so that it is only selected workflows and steps, and keep it only to the steps to the end steps. For example, I could only keep it, for example, to 2 end steps, or just the approved end step, the positive green one. But since I am going to do it all in one report, so let's do it using this standard filter. Choose the system step equals to, and what was the name of the step? Gift approved. Okay, so let's call it gift approved. Okay, let's see, do we need some of this, this information? Hidden columns we can, for example, add here. If a column is here in the hidden, then the user can still add them as long as they are made available through the columns and source selections. The user can then add them themselves to their own view, to their own private view. These are just the ones that are visible by default. So for example, maybe we can get rid of the days and steps, and this is going to be end step. Assigned to same also, because this is only since workflow instances and end steps are not going to be assigned to anyone. Date received is okay. Step is also irrelevant. Let's see, let's move this one point up, and maybe the title one up as well. Gift value as well. The gift description can be a little bit wonky, so we can get rid of that as well. And let's see what else. Maybe the form type, we can also move it up here. Okay, so for now, let's see what this will look like. Let's close. So this is the default view, the all gifts and donations, very ugly, and we didn't configure it too much. But now let's go to our new view, all approved gifts and donations. And the important thing is that these are only the 2 that are in the approved end step. So if we go back, if we go back, we will find that only these 2 are in the positive gift approved end step, and this is reflected in here, that I can only see these two, and they are both from the gift form. We do not have any approved donations yet, which is what we're going to do now. Let's quickly create and fast track a donation for quick approval. All right, title, donation 1. Let's add something like 1,000. Since this is above 1,000, it will need an additional approval. Let's go to it. Approve, manager approval, and now this will go to the compliance approval because it is a big donation. So let's approve that as well. And now it arrived in the gift approved step. Okay, so now it should be visible on our report. First of all, as on all the gifts and donations, of course, is going to appear on here, and then inside the all approved gifts and donations, as you can see, this is our new donation that was added here. Okay, so now let's add one more view. This time let's make it a chart view. So let's go. Let's add a chart. Let's add the same filter here as we did previously. Step equal, and 1 second, I'm just going to copy it from the previous one. All approved gifts and donations, gift approved. Copy, new view. Paste. Okay, and let's call it approved gift and donations value. And let's see. Oops, I got rid of it by accident. Okay. Oh no, sorry. I minimized it. Okay, never mind. Let's make it a donut chart. Labeled by, okay, let's divide it so that we'll have a chart that shows the breakdown of the total value of all the gifts and all the donations. So let's do it, label column by form type, and we want the total value, so we wanted the sum of the gift value form field. So essentially now it will be divided, the pie chart will be, sorry, the donut chart will be divided into two sections, one for the gift form and one for the donation form, and each kind of section of the donut will represent the total value of all gifts and the total value of all donations. And we can add a custom title, gift and donation breakdown. And we can of course select a custom color. For example, let's go with maybe this very olive green color. Okay, let's check it out. So this is all approved, and now we have one more additional view, approved gifts and donation value. Okay, so okay, maybe this color isn't the most pretty, but essentially here we have the legend that the donation, these are the ones that use the donation form, is this big section here, and you can see that the total value is 1,000, and this is indeed true because we have only one donation for the value of 1,000. And here we have the gift form, and the total value is 200, which is true. If we can go back to our other view, we can see that yes, indeed, I have one donation for 1,000, and I have one gift for 150 and another gift for 50. So the values match. Okay, but there's one more cool thing that we can do. To add to the chart, we can add another table underneath the chart. We can, of course, as I showed in the purchase request application, we can have multiple aggregation levels for the charts. But in our case, we don't really have that much data, so we can kind of skip that. So all we're going to do is in our approved gift and donations value, the donut chart, what we're going to do is we're going to add, but not another chart level, we're going to add a detailed data level. We can only have one, and it can only be at the very bottom, but this is essentially another table view seen at the very bottom. Okay, so let's quickly configure it. Let's see, we can get rid of, we can move this one up here. Form type we do not need, since that's what we'll already be selecting that. Recipient is okay. Step is irrelevant because it will always be the end step. Title is cool, we can keep the title. Date received is fine as well. Assigned to is also relevant because this is an end step. Gift value, okay, we can move that up. Gift description, we can get rid of that. Days in step is also relevant. Okay, so kind of very similar to our all approved gifts and donations. Let's save it. And check it out. Okay, so now if I select this one here, gift form, I should be taken to my 2 approved gifts. And the cool thing is that all these columns that are available inside that have been made available in the source column configuration of the report are also available for me, and as a private end user, I can save this as a private view. If I am the administrator, I can later maybe publish the view and move it to, if I had private views, I can publish them, or I can make published views private. Again, this is just an additional level of customization for end users that maybe want to create their own slightly more unique views. But as the administrator, I make the global views, and these 3 are the global views that we created. So we have the basic view and then the 2 views that we created, and that pretty much sums up reports. Again, this is a very simple one. There is only 3 data points for this report, so there is not too much. But I hope this illustrates what you can do with the reports in WEBCON BPS 2019. And now let's all the stuff that we made, so the start buttons and all the views, let's put them to use on a dashboard. Dashboards can be used to present data very densely or very sparsely, depending on how you choose. You can customize dashboards to be viewed by specific users. So for example, you can have one dashboard for management, which of course has a lot of tables, a lot of graphs, or you can have one just a simple landing page for end users so that they can find all the stuff very easily. Like for example, start buttons paired with some reports so that they can quickly access data and maybe improve their work. So let's add a very simple dashboard, really not targeted towards anyone, just one that will show off some of the features. So okay, so you've already seen what a configured dashboard looks like. This is a very raw one, so let's call this gifts and donations statistics or something like that. Let's add okay, let's do the 3-column setup. So first of all, you can of course add the start buttons that we configured. So let's add register gift. Whoops, what did I click? Okay. And in the other one, well, of course we can add them next to each other, beneath each other, but let's just add it next to it in this column here. Alright, so now we have 2 start buttons for starting the 2 different form types. Let's also add a counter. Let's see here. Okay, from this view, gift value sum. Let's change the font to white or gray, and the background to something dark. Font size something big. Display name total value of approved gifts and donations. Okay, and this is the 2 gifts worth 200 and the 1 donation worth 1000. So this kind of sums up all our approved gifts and donations. Okay, let's add some reports, or specifically some views. Let's see, let's have, okay, this one. This is the first additional view that we configured. This is not the default view. This is the one for all approved gifts and donations. Now let's add the chart. Which one was it? Oh, I should have named them something more. My naming policy for views isn't very good. Oh well, too bad. Actually, let's just call this breakdown. Okay. And also we can embed stuff. So for example, let's fetch the WEBCON BPS YouTube. this is fine. Okay, let's pause it. Please don't play, thank you. Okay, this is the embed code. Yeah, sure, allow access, why not? Okay, let's add a nice big column for this. Here, embed element, paste the YouTube embed code. Okay, tada. Let's just, for the sake of completion, let's add one giant report containing all the basic views and call it all submitted gifts and donations. Okay, so let's turn off the edit mode to see what it looks like. Or first, let's save. All right, now let's turn off edit mode. Okay, so this is a dashboard which we can access. Here a new section arrived called dashboards, and essentially you can configure this to have anything you want. So for example, as I mentioned, if you want a dashboard for managers, then you would of course want a lot of tables, a lot of dense data packed together so that they can compare data from different reports. But for an end user, you would probably want stuff like this, maybe a text box with information about what they're supposed to do, a bunch of start buttons, maybe an instructional video, and somewhere maybe a big report containing all the stuff that's relevant to them. So here is a very basic dashboard which I just threw together in 2 minutes, which contains some of the, well, actually all of the presentation elements that we created over the course of the video. Okay, and of course, as with all presentation elements, the dashboard itself and all of Portal can be embedded into SharePoint if you ever want to use it. So another thing that I would like to show before we finish, before we wrap up the video, is the various search functions. So of course, here at the top of the main area, you have your application search. So all applications to which you have access to, you can find it. So so here we have our own gift and hospitality that we created. The navigation, search and navigation will search within, currently I am narrowed down to the gifts and hospitality application. So it will search the gifts and hospitality application for the various elements that we created. So for example, if I type in start, it will show us the 2 start buttons that we created. And then I have only one report. So it will, whoops. Oh, okay, I have to search for the name of the actual, okay, never mind. So all gifts and donations, so this is my only one report. So essentially all the stuff in this navigation panel, I can search for these. I also have the global search tool, which is our brand new tool, which searches not only for things like application navigation elements, presentation elements, but also for workflow instances. So for example, I vaguely remember I have a lot of workflow instances with the name, with the value tests typed somewhere. So like in the title or in the description. So let's search for that. And as we can see here in the gift approval in this application, so it means in this gift and hospitality application, I found indeed some 3 different workflow instances where somewhere I typed in the word test. Of course, I can switch this to in all applications, and so all applications where, or so all workflow instances in all applications where somebody somewhere typed in the word test, it will bring them up. And in navigation, I don't think I have any called here. So yeah, but this is essentially just a navigation search, like the same one as here. But thanks to this search, this big search, we can search for workflow instances very quickly throughout all of WEBCON BPS system. Okay, so I think that wraps up this video. I covered all the topics that I wanted. So the idea was to create a business application, and it has the 3 cornerstones: the workflow, the form, and the end user site. And we created all of them. So the workflow, kind of, where can we take it from here? So the very basic, the shell took us just over an hour. So from here we can expand the workflow by making it more intricate, making it have more steps, more paths. We can add actions, timeout actions, cyclical actions, and we can of course add more workflows, more processes, and have them interact with each other. So one workflow finishes and it starts another one, etc., etc. For the form, we can increase the end user interaction by adding extra information to the form, like task details. We can add tooltips to the path buttons so that when a user hovers over them, they will know what each path button does. And of course, we can make the forms more intricate. We had only 5 form fields, but we can imagine what it would be like if we had more form fields. Some of them maybe that load data from external systems, and add form rules in JavaScript to make conditionally appearing form fields. So for example, I select a checkbox and then that makes some form fields appear or disappear. And of course the site, so we had only one very basic site, which was a mishmash of all the cool features that we have on dashboards, but the idea would probably be to make targeted dashboards. So you would have one dashboard for end users to register gifts and donations, or just so they can interact with it very easily, with the dashboard very easily. And then you could have one which would help manager or compliance approval people to approve gifts and donations, and it is dense in data. It has a lot of reports, a lot of statistics, a lot of useful information for them, which will help them complete their task, which in our case is to approve or reject the donation requests. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.